الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم رب اشرح لنا صدورنا ويسر لنا. اللهم صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير خلق كله. بسم الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعلى هذا إذا ترك تعديل الأركان في باب الصلاة لا يمكن تداركه بالمثل إذ لا مثل له عند العبد فسقط. So based on this, if a person were to leave the calmness in posture whilst performing salah, then compensation will not be possible with the like thereof. And if there is nothing like it for the servant, then it will drop off. ولو ترك الصلاة في أيام التشريق فقضاها في غير أيام التشريق لا يكبر لأنه ليس له التكبير بالجهر شرعا. So if a person were to leave Salah in the days of Tashriq and he performs qada of it in days that is not the days of Tashriq, then he will not make takbir because لأنه ليس له تكبير بالجهر شرعا, because according to Sharia there is no takbir on those days. وقلنا في ترك قراءة الفاتحة والقنوت والتشهد وتكبيرات العيدين إنه ينجبر بالسهو. And we say that not reciting Surah Fatiha and Dua Qunut and Tashahud and the two takbirs of Eid Salah will be compensated with Sajda Sahu.
Okay. بسم الله
ولو
الرحمن
طاف.
الرحيم. So we busy discussing with regard to the execution, okay, or the fulfillment of an amr. That when you are carrying out an amr, it is of two types. Either you carry it out ada'an or qada'an. Ada'an will mean what? To do that hukam in exactly the manner that is expected of you by the one who is entitled to your duty. And qada is where you carry out that particular action, what you've been instructed to do, in what is something similar, not exactly, but something similar to what was expected of you by the mustahiq, by the one who is entitled to your obedience. Then we mentioned that ada is of two types, ada'ul kamil and ada'ul qasir. Ada'ul kamil is where you carry out that action with all the sifat intact and exactly as you are supposed to, perfectly, and according to spec, as we might say in English, and that is ada'ul kamil. And ada'ul qasir is where you carry out the action, but there is a deficiency in the sifa, in the quality of your performance. For example, you're reading salah, but you read it in salah with jama'at, in takbir ula and so forth. That's ada'ul kamil. Because you've delivered the salah, you've carried out the salah, you executed your duty as was expected of you. And on the other hand, if you perform salah, but you left out ta'adilul arkan, then you've performed the salah, you've executed your duty, but it is deficient because of this deficiency in the quality of the salah. By you leaving out the ta'adilul arkan, performing the postures in a calm manner and in a collected manner. Then they mention that the hukam of this second type, adawul qasir, is that if there is any way to compensate for this deficiency, then you will do so. It will be necessary for you to compulsory for you to do so. However, if it will come later on. If there's no, okay, the second half of it will come. If there's nothing to compensate for it, what happens then? It will come later on. Now here he's just giving a few examples, and again he's giving the example which we mentioned with regards to ta'adilul arkan. That if a person does not perform ta'adil arkan, there's no way to compensate for that because there is no like of it in the Sharia. The Sharia has not stipulated any compensation for it. Neither is there any rational compensation for it either. You can't just make ta'adil arkan on its own without performing salah. And similarly, if a person leaves out salah during the days of tashriq, for example, days of tashriq are the 3 days after Eid, in which we recite the takbir aloud after every salah. So if a person missed any of those salahs during that time, and is only performing a salah afterwards, qada'an, that's after the day of tashriq fast, then you will not recite the takbir loudly then, even though it was wajib for him during the days of Tashriq to recite it once after every fard salah. Understand? But when he's making the qada of those salah which he missed during the days of Tashriq, then he will 11, 12, and 13. Then he will not make the takbir loudly. Why? Because there is no compensation for that. The Sharia is not stipulated any compensation for that. So therefore, he cannot read the takbir loudly afterwards. Understood?
Okay.
And similarly, if a person must omit the Surah Fatiha and the Qunut and the Shahud and the takbir, the extra takbirs of Eid, and these can all be compensated because these are all wajibat. Surah Fatiha is a wajib in the Hanafi madhab, so is the Qunut and so forth. So this can be compensated through sahwa, sajda is sahwa, because that is what the Sharia has stipulated as a compensation, as a means of making up for that deficiency in your salah. Okay?
ولو طاف طواف الفرد محدثا ينجبر ذلك بالدم وهو مثل له شرعا. So if a person was to make tawaf in the state of impurity, then it will be compensated with the slaughtering of an animal, and that is like it. That is the like thereof in Sharia.
Right. So this masala I touched on yesterday, and we did it before as well. And so this is how this particular deficiency can be made up through slaughtering of an animal, because that is what the Sharia has stipulated as a means of a penalty to make up for that deficiency in your ibadah. Okay?
وعلى هذا لو أدى زيفا مكان جيد فهلك عند القابض لا شيء له على المديون عند أبي حنيفة، لأنه لا مثل لصفة الجودة منفردة حتى يمكن جبرها بالمثل. So based on that, if a person pays with weaker currency or counterfeit currency in place of the genuine currency, then according to Imam Abu Hanifa, the currency and the currency is lost by the one who took it. That according to Abu Hanifa, there will be no compensation for it, for the counterfeit currency itself, to such that the fault may be overcome with the like thereof.
Okay. So based upon this principle, that in the Sharia, if there is a deficiency in the quality of your performance, in your execution of your duty, if there is a way to compensate for it, then you need to do so. Otherwise, not. And although you'll still be sinful. So based upon this, when it comes to hukukul ibad, now we discuss hukukullah, salah, tawaf, and so forth. لو أدى زيفا مكان جيد, if a person paid inferior quality money in place of the good quality money, currency. And so like I mentioned yesterday, it's easy to make this mistake and it's quite often made also. Zaif, although the dictionary has counterfeit, that's not exactly correct. Zaif refers to that money, that currency which is of not a good quality. And the gold, the quantity of gold in there, the percentage of gold in there is not as much as it's supposed to be. Understand? Or the quantity of the silver is not as much as it's supposed to be. Still more than the alloy, than the other metal which has been added to it, but it is much less than a good quality coin. So it's not the same as being fake money, because fake money obviously is not money. Nobody accepts it, not even in the market. But the zaif will be accepted by the market, even though the what you call it, um, the Islamic Treasury, what's the Arabic name for it? The Islamic Treasury won't accept it. Okay, that I can't get to the name now. The Islamic
بيت
Treasury won't
المال.
accept it. The Baytul Mal, Jazakallah. The Baytul Mal won't accept it, even though the traders are happy to take it, because it is still used as a currency, because not fake as such. But anyway, so if a person wants to pay this inferior type currency in place of the good quality currency for halaka in the qabid, and then that money is destroyed in the possession of the person who took it. Understand? Then la shay'a lahu ala al-madjun. He does not have any right against the debtor. He can't ask for it. I mean, after the currency got destroyed, he came to learn that this wasn't the proper currency, and it was of the weaker quality currency. So here again, the deficiency is where in the quality of the money, not in the money itself. I think the quality of the money is of a lesser standard. So because this is ada and it is ada, so according to Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi, that creditor will not be allowed to ask for his money back from the debtor. That pay me a second time because the first money that you gave me was not of the same quality money that I gave you. So when you borrowed the money, I gave you proper quality, good quality money. You gave me inferior quality money. So this is still ada, although it's ada al-qasib. And there is no compensation to make up for that inferior quality. And because how are you going to determine that? How will you determine what must be given to that person for the inferior quality of the money? Okay, so there is no like of it. So because there is no like of it, this ada, although it be qasir, although it be deficient, it will still be considered to be ada. It will still be considered to have paid off his debt um, to the creditor, according to Imam Hanifa rahmatullah. Follow?
جي.
Why? لأنه لا مثل لصفة الجودة منفردة حتى يمكن جبرها بالمثال. Why? Because there is no like of the quality of excellence. And there is no equality, there is no something, there is nothing that is equal to the quality of excellence by itself. How are you going to separate excellence by itself and say, yeah, this is in lieu of the excellence that is missing from the coin? Now, how are you going to do that? Because Jawda is a quality, a sifa of something. You can't have a sifa alone on its own. It must be accompanied by the mawsuf. You understand? You're saying good quality coins. You can't just have good quality by itself. Not something that you can show separate to the coin or separate to something. Okay? But because there is no likeness of it in reality, and hatta yumkinu jabruha, to the extent that it is possible for us to use that likeness to compensate for this lack of quality, understand? So because of that, Imam Hanifa says that he has discharged his duty and you cannot ask for him to repay that money.
لو سلم العبد مباح الدم بجناية عند الغاصب أو عند البائع بعد البيع فإن هلك عند المالك أو المشتري قبل الدفع لزمه الثمن. So if a slave who has been sentenced to execution for a sin he had committed by the usurper or by the seller after the sale has been completed. So if this slave has to pass away in the maliki by the owner or by the buyer before handing it over, then the price will be lazim on him. وبرئ الغاصب باعتبار أصل الأداء, and the ghasib, the usurper, will be free from obligation as ada has occurred. So وإن قتل بتلك الجناية استند الهلاك إلى أول سببه فصار كأنه لم يوجد الأداء عند أبي حنيفة. So if a slave is killed because of that crime, the loss will be given to the cause of death, and therefore it would be as if the ada did not take place, according to Imam Abu Hanifa.
So here now he's starting with, he's giving us a masala that is two-faced, you can say, or two different masail, because the outcome is the same. He's mentioning both of them together. One is with regards to a business transaction, and one is with regards to a ghasab, which is usurpation of somebody's wealth. Both of these masail have the same conclusion. So he's saying, وَلَوْ سَلَّمَ الْعَبْدُ مَبَاحَ الدَّمِ بِجِنَايَةٍ عِنْدَ الْغَاصِبِ, that if a slave, or Suleiman, if a slave is handed over in this condition, that he has become mubahud dam, his life is under, he is about to be executed. Okay? He's about to be executed. Why? Because bijinayatin, because of a crime in the ghasib committed while he was in the position of the ghasib. أو عند البائع بعد البيع, or in the position of the seller after the transaction was concluded. Okay, so again,
जी
we have two masail here. We have one where the slave was forcefully taken by someone, a horse, right? Or we have the second masala is we have a seller selling the slave to someone, right? But and the deal was already concluded. But before the ghasib handed over the slave back to the original owner, or before the seller handed over the slave to the buyer, that particular slave committed a crime, such a crime which made him liable to be executed. In other words, he committed a murder. Follow Surah Al-Masala? Right.
जी
Now, فَإِنْ هَلَكَ
Can I
إِنْ
just repeat that again?
الْمَالِ. Right. So the first masala is the person, a ghasib, and he forcefully took somebody's slave, right? He forcefully took somebody's slave, and then he handed the slave back to the master. But when he was by the ghasib, the usurper, the person who forcefully took him, he committed an act of murder which made him liable to be executed by the Sharia. Got that?
जी
Right. The second masala is a person sold somebody else a slave. They sold Bakr a slave. Right? The deal was concluded. All that had needed to be done was they needed to hand over the slave to Bakr, and Bakr needed to pay the money. But before he could hand over the slave to Bakr, that slave committed an act of murder, which obviously again he has to be executed for. Right? So when he handed over the slave to Bakr, that slave was going to be executed. You follow? So the crime was
जी
committed in the position of the ghasib in the first masala, or in the position of the seller in the second masala. You follow?
जी
Right. Now, in fine, halaka in the maliki aw al-mushtari qabla
Jim,
dafi.
you're just breaking up on my side.
Okay.
It's
From the beginning again, or
slightly lagging.
you want me to repeat from the beginning, or what? Hello?
I don't know. I
Hello?
still can't hear Moulana. I just hear breaking up.
You want me to repeat the masala from the
And
beginning,
now I
or
can
must
hear
I carry
Moulana
on?
better, Jim. No, just that last line that Moulana was busy with.
Geez. So I was saying that if you have that there are two masalas here. One is somebody forcefully took somebody's slave, a ghasib, right? That's the one masala. And then while he was in the ghasib's position, the usurper, he committed an act of murder because of which he was to be executed. Okay? And then he handed over the slave to the original owner while that slave was in that particular state guilty of a crime. The second masala is we have a person who sold a slave to somebody and they concluded the deal, right? And then before he could hand over the slave, the goods, so to speak, that slave committed an act of murder for which he was to be executed. After that, he handed over the slave to the buyer. You follow so far? Right. فإن هلك عند المالك أو المشتري قبل الدفع لزمه الثمن. Now they're saying that in the first masala, if that slave was to die, a natural death, in the position of the owner, the original owner, the one who was given the slave back to by the usurper, by the horse in the first masala. Awil mushtari, or the buyer in the second masala. The slave died, right? A natural death. Qabla daf'i, daf'i refers before handing him over to his executors, before handing him over to the Sharia court to be executed, he died. You follow?
जी
Right? In both masalas, he died. In the position of the original owner, or in the first masala, or in the position of the buyer in the second masala. Then it's saying lazima uthaman, in the buyer will have to hand over the money to the seller. He is still liable to pay the price of his slave to the seller. Wabari al-ghasib, and in the first masala, the ghasib will be absolved of his duty of handing over the slave. Then why? بِاعْتِبَارِ أَصْلِ الْأَدَاء. out of consideration for the actual ada, then actual execution of his duty. What was his duty? His duty of the ghasi was to return the slave. And he did
hand it
that.
over.
Although there is a deficiency in the quality of the slave now. Okay? And the same thing with the buyer. His duty was to hand over the goods to the seller, which he did. And even though it's now defective goods, because the slave is liable to be executed. So because Aslul Ada, the actual duty itself was performed by these two individuals, we will say that they have done their part. They cannot be held liable for what happened to the slave afterwards. If he died a natural death. You follow?
जी
But now they're saying, well, in Kutila Bitilka Jinai, however, if he was executed, the slave, right? So that's the first part in the Masla. But if he was executed because of that crime, he didn't die natural death, he was executed. استند الهلاك إلى أول سببه فصار كأنه لم يوجد أداء عند أبي حنيفة. Then in that case, we won't look at the fact that they made ada, but in this case here, we will what's the word? We will attribute istanada. We will attribute his death to the cause of his death, to the first cause of it. So what was the cause of his death? The crime, right? Crime of murder. Yes.
जी
Where did that
जी
take place? It took place in the position of the seller or in the hands of the horse. So it goes back to them. Okay? Because it happened in their possession, the cause of the crime and the time of when it took place was in their possession, the buyer or the horse. So we will attribute the cause of death to that time. So because of that, صار كأنه لم يوجد الأداء. It is as if they did not hand over the slave at all. As if handing over the slave or handing over by the ghasib or the seller did not take place at all, according to Mahad Suffah rahmatullahi alayhi. Understood?
जी
जी
Any questions?
no no understood.
Now he's saying, وَالْمَغْصُوبَةُ if a slave girl was forcefully taken away, and she was usurped. إِذَا رُدَّتْ حَامِلًا if she is now returned to the master, حاملا, pregnant, بِفِعْلٍ إِنَّ الْغَاصِبِ because of an act which took place while she was in the position of the usurper. فَمَاتَتْ بِوَلَادَتِهِ and she dies in childbirth. In the Maliki by the original in the position of the original owner. لا يبرأ الغاصب عن الضمان. Then in this case also the ghasib will not be absolved of the penalty of being liable for the slave, but he must pay the price of the slave. But why? Because again, the cause of her death was childbirth, and the cause of childbirth happened in the position of the ghasib.
غاصب
What?
just say غاصب
G. So the original cause of her death in reality then is the ghasib. And because that took place, that happened, the thing that led to her death happened while she was there by him. So he will be held responsible for her death. As such, he will have to pay the price of the slave girl because in this case here, by him handing over the slave girl, he didn't do anything and it just led to her death. So it is as if he destroyed or he destroyed the goods while it was in his possession. So therefore now he can't pay the slave girl herself, so he must pay the like of her, which is the money. He must pay the price of what it cost the owner to buy her. You follow? This is going on here.
जी
Any question?
no
Okay, inshallah, we'll stop there, inshallah. Then after it goes on to Qadar, goes on to Qadar, inshallah, after that. So Maghrib is getting a bit later here. So I might come on a few minutes later, just after 7 or so, depending. Especially from next week onwards. Maghrib now at the moment is 20 to 7 Adhan.
okay
So it might be a few minutes later. I don't know what we're going to do after that, but anyway, khair.
inshallah
Okay. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك ونتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم
وعليكم
السلام.
السلام.